you here for another week of learning math from a computer. It's not what I'd hoped for, but it's the best we can do given the circumstances. You'll notice that I've got an orange hat on today. This is the hat I wear when I go outside the woods during hunting season to make sure I'm not mistaken for a deer. So far, the rankings for hat voting leaves Mr. B Hat in the lead. So if you like something else, make sure you comment below or let me know in another way which hat you want me to wear when we come back to school. We've moved on to our new unit. Our new unit is measurement. Measurement is how we measure the quantity of things or how much something has, and we are going to be looking at all different kinds of measurement from length to volume, looking at visually, looking at it in terms of numbers, and that's going to be over the next few weeks. It's going to ask you, unlike our last units where you just had to memorize vocabulary, we're going to be looking at actually solving problems now. So I'm going to give you a lot of opportunities to pause the video to try to solve things so I'm not doing the work for you. Because as you know, if you've been in my class, that it's impossible to actually learn something just by listening to somebody. You actually have to think for yourself. So if I tell you to pause it and try it, I mean it. Pause the computer, try it yourself, and struggle with it a little bit because you're not going to learn if you're not going to struggle. So let's get started with our problem-solving task. I'm going to go through it exactly as you see it in your Google Doc on your packet, and we're going to solve the questions together. You can type in your answers on the paper, or you can handwrite them on a paper on the side, just as, again, as long as you are learning it and trying it yourself, instead of just copying down the things I say, you're going to get a chance to learn this stuff. All right, here you see our problem-solving task to start our unit. We have 3 people driving in order to reach their vacation destinations. The amount of time it took for them to reach their destinations is provided below. So we have 3 travelers, Richard, Edward, and Joanne. And the time driving, we have Richard with 4 hours, Edward with 1 hour and 77 minutes, and Joanne with 256 minutes. I want you to order their travel times from greatest to least. Pause now. Try it. See what you need to do to figure that out. So, the first thing you might have done is seen that 256 is the biggest, 4 is the smallest, 1 hour 77 in the middle. Seeing the bigger numbers. But that's not going to work for us in this situation. So let's think about what we can do to make these work. So we need to get our minutes and hours into the same units. If we're turning one unit into another, we need to find out how much of one unit is inside of another. So we know that when we have minutes and hours, that 60 minutes equals 1 hour. That makes sense in words to us, but it doesn't actually make sense in terms of addition, multiplication, or any of the other things. So I'm going to show you real quick my way of looking at this here. Know after looking at that we need to get the same kind of unit, but we don't know which operation to use to do it. And we can make things like into bigger units or smaller units. But when you think about making it into bigger units, you might think bigger multiplication because it's getting bigger. Well, the unit's getting bigger, but what's really happening is you're making groups that are bigger. So this is kind of a confusing thing. You can pause it if you need to, but basically I've written this up. It says, when you turn minutes into hours, you're making groups, because an hour is bigger than a minute. So when you make groups, that's division. What I've illustrated here is taking, right here, 102 minutes, lots of minutes, and I'm making it into groups of 60. So even though I'm making it into a bigger unit, an hour, it's actually a division problem because I'm making it into a group. So there's my 60 minutes broken into 1 hour, but you'll see I can't fit all of my minutes into an hour. So I divided by 60. All I could make was actually one group in 102 minutes. So you'll see if you actually draw a visual here. Drawing a visual is not the best way to do these problems because it took me a long time and a lot of counting to make 102 dashes. So instead, the best way to do it is use the actual division algorithm, which we're all masters of at this point. It says 102 divided by 60, and then I can see 102 divided by 60 is 1, remainder 42. That remainder is what? Pause, think about it. Hopefully you paused and thought about it, so we could get 1 hour out of 102 minutes, but then you still have 42 minutes left. So when we move to that bigger unit, we actually divide to get a bigger unit because we're making groups. If you look at the other way, This is where we're taking a bigger unit and making it into smaller pieces. Okay, so when you turn hours into minutes, you are breaking up groups into many pieces, finding the total. When you break up something into lots of pieces and you're finding how many pieces there are, you're multiplying. Think of if you have a box of water bottles, each box has 12 water bottles. You have 4 boxes, 4 times 12. You're breaking up the boxes into individual water bottles. In this problem, I have 3 hours. Those hours are going to get broken into lots of little pieces when I make it into minutes. So I have to multiply to get the minutes. So you can see what I did is I drew 60 little dashes in each of those hours. Not a good strategy. If you're desperate, sure, go ahead. But really, it's just illustrating that you have each one of these is 1 hour, and each hour has 60 minutes inside of it. So 3 times 60, 3 hours, times 60 minutes in an hour equals 180 minutes. So you'll see that we used multiplication when the unit got smaller because we had more in each unit. All right, so hopefully you struggled through that problem-solving task a little bit, and now we've talked about how you can tell if you're multiplying or dividing when you're changing your units. Again, thinking when you're going to a bigger unit, you divide. It makes it a little easier for us to solve our problem-solving task. So we're going to check our work again. You've already solved this because if you're not trying on your own, you're not going to learn it. We have 4 hours. If I have 4 hours and I'm turning it to minutes, and I turn that to minutes, think to yourself, am I multiplying or am I dividing? So I'm going from hours to minutes, I'm making the units smaller, which means there's going to be more of them, so I have to multiply. And since I already know there's 60 minutes in an hour, I do 4 times 60 equals, and this is one of those problems where it's 4 times 6 with a 0 on it, so it's really quickly using my powers of 10. 4 times 6 is 24, but 10 times greater is 240. So Richard took 240 minutes. That's Richard. On the other hand, Edward had 1 hour and 177 minutes. So in this case, I don't need to change the 177 minutes to minutes because it's already in the right unit. But I do need to change the hour. So I take 1 hour, 1 times 60 is 60. And if you may not have written that work out, that's pretty easy to see. But I have to then I have to add my 60 minutes plus 177 minutes equals, so 60 plus 100 would be 160, 77 plus 160, 137 minutes. Sorry, 200, sorry, that was 237 minutes. Forgot to carry my 1. That's why you should write it on paper, not type it out. Our last one in Joanne, we already know is already in minutes, is 256 minutes. And now it's just a matter of seeing that I have Joanne with 256 minutes, Richard with 240, and then Edward with 237. That's my ranking. That's how I would do it because I already have minutes and I find it's easier to multiply than to divide. Some of you might have done the other way around, taken the minutes and divided them by 60. So if you had gone the other way, you could have also used division and turned the minutes into hours. And that's a little bit harder for me just because it involves division with a big number like 60, but it is possible. Usually if I'm comparing numbers, it's easy to make everything into minutes, but problems are going to require you to do it both ways. So if it's 256 divided by 60, if you use the long division algorithm, which I'm not going to show you, you get about 4 hours and 16 minutes. Well, 4 remainder 16, which is 4 hours and 16 minutes. Or some of you might have actually just used repeated subtraction, which is also possible because division is repeated subtraction, and just done 256 minus 60 minus 60 minus 60. And then you get the same thing. You can subtract 64 times with 16 left over, so 4 hours and 16 minutes. Again, using the division strategy, I would have to turn the 177 minutes from Edward into hours as well. 177 divided by 60 equals 2 remainder 57. Or you could just subtract 60 and see it's 2 times, but I have to add that 2 hours with the 1 hour that Edward already had. So 2 hours, that should be R, 2 hours and 57 minutes You can use MIN for an abbreviation for minutes. The total would be actually plus 1 hour. Oop, that's plus 1 hour, not equals 1 hour. Plus 1 hour equals 3 hours and 57 minutes. And we see with the same ranking that would be Edward's time would be the least time, which matches our minutes answer. So that's it for our problem solving task. We've learned when we multiply and when we divide. Well, problem solving task, we've learned when we multiply and when we divide for these problems. All thinking about whether the units getting bigger. Are we using a bigger unit with a bigger group of things? We're putting things together and dividing them into groups. Or are we breaking it up into smaller units? And that's what you have to do today. It's involving a lot of remainders, work with division. So I know we've been doing a lot of fraction remainders. This is going to be a whole number of remainders. You're going to keep them because they're going to be the smaller unit pieces. And then multiplication, sometimes you need to add on extra afterwards too. And that's what it's about. Today we're just converting minutes to hours. Maybe some questions asked you to try with seconds too, thinking about how seconds fit in there. So let's go through our guided practice. I'm going to quickly go through those problems with you, get you on your own, practicing these problems so you can go to your Eduelastic quiz and show what you know. All right, on to page 2 is our guided practice page. Before you get to guided practice, it does have Khan Academy videos, practice and the videos and practice links. These aren't required if you're in DePaul because we're using the Amplify for our spiral review. For this week at least, I'll always let you know in a Google Classroom assignment if it's required. But if you're in other classes, check with your teacher. Those Khan Academy videos and practice might be required for you. In DePaul, use them if you need them. You don't feel the need to do it if you know what you're doing and you feel like you're getting things right. Guided practice. We already got this one down. 1 hour equals how many minutes? Say it to yourself. Hopefully you said 60. Great. Moving on. The number of hours will always be blank at the same time in minutes. So if I tell you a time in hours, think about it. In minutes, is that time going to be a bigger number or a smaller number? And in this case, is it more or less time? We're asking if the number is going to be bigger or smaller. And since hours is a bigger unit, that means the number for hours will always be less than the same time in minutes. It doesn't mean the time is shorter or smaller. I say smaller because it's not the time is shorter. It's just that the number is smaller. When I think about when I talk with Eamon, he might be confused if I said, "Oh yeah, we're going to go somewhere in 5 hours." He might think that's short because the number 5 is really small. But 5 hours is actually 300 minutes, which sounds really big, but the same amount of time. That's because the number of minutes will always be blank than the same time in hours. The number of minutes is always going to be larger than the same time in hours. People use this trick all the time. If they want to make something seem bigger, they'll show it in minutes. If they want to make it seem smaller, show it in hours because the number is going to be smaller. So take a second now that you know how it works, we're going to complete this conversion. I'm going to show you a quick chart I use to help me, kind of like a cheat sheet, if you will, to solve these problems. I'm going to show it to you right now. Cheat sheet isn't actually cheating at all. I have a lot of students who write this down before they take tests, so they have it memorized. It works for any kind of unit conversion you want to do. The same general structure of the cheat sheet works, but you're going to need to change the unit conversions because you're changing. It's not always going by 60. But in this case, I always put the biggest unit over on the left because in place values is where the biggest things are. So I keep that constant for me in all of my unit conversion charts. But the smallest unit over here, that says seconds. I didn't rewrite it even though I made a mistake. I'm running low on paper, believe it or not. This quarantine's messing with me as well as you. We have seconds over here, minutes, hours. If I'm going to the bigger unit, what do you need to do? That's right, divide, because you're making a group. And when you make a group, you're dividing. And then minutes to hours is divided by 60 as well. This is a really great conversion chart because it goes by the same amount between both of those. If you went hours to days, though, think to yourself, what would go in hours to days? You don't need to know for these problems? Hopefully, you'd be thinking about dividing by 24 because there's 24 hours in one day. Going back down the chart, when I go hours to minutes, I multiply times 60, minutes to seconds times 60. Okay? So you can make a chart like this if you want to. Pause the screen, write it down. It might help you. It's not going to give you the answers, but it'll give you on the right track for those answers. So let's get going back to our guided practice, solve those next questions. All right, we have 5 hours equals how many minutes? I'm going hours to minutes. I know I'm going to a smaller unit. When I go to a smaller unit, I need to multiply by the number of units in each hour. So that's going to be times 60. This one I don't need to do in my head. I already even said it to you before. 5 hours is 5 times 60. 5 times 6 is 30, so I might my 30 out, but it's 10 times bigger because it's 60, not 6, 300 minutes. That's not one I'd require you to show your work for because you could do that in your head. But 23 hours into minutes, that's going to be a little more substantial. 23 times 6, I can't do that in my head. I could do 3 times 6 plus 20 times 6, but I'm going to quickly do that. I guess do that right now. 3 times 6, solve it, 18, but it's actually 180 because it's 60. And then 20 times 6 would be 120, but I have to add an extra 0 because it's 10 times bigger. So 1,200. So 1,200 plus 180, 1,380 minutes. Again, I multiplied it, went from that unit down. Minutes to hours. In this situation, I need to divide because, well, I should have asked you to do that before. But there I go. It's hard to do this when I'm far away. Minutes to hours. I'm taking my units, putting them into a bigger group. I've got to divide. 840, I can't do that in my head. Solve for yourself. You need to divide 840 divided by 60. I'll tell you in a second, but check it on your own. Go. $840 minutes divided by 60 hours in minutes in an hour. It's going to be 14 exactly. There's no remainder, so I have no minutes to put in afterwards. It's 14 hours. 1,620 minutes into hours. The same thing. Minutes to hours. Putting little units into a big group. That's right. You're dividing by what? By 60. Let's do it. All right. So we've got the first couple done slowly, and I want you to set yourself a timer. Try to do the next few in about 3 minutes, just like we do in class. I'm going to come back and give you those answers. So take some time on your own. Try it on your own. See if you can do these. I'm going to come back to you with some answers to these guided practice questions before you go on your own to that independent practice and crank this out. Let's do it. Did you actually try those problems on your own? Remember, if there's no struggle, there's no progress. Take a second. Check those problems right now before I go back to that guided practice page. All right, I'm counting on the fact that you took some time and tried these on your own. Our first one starts off pretty easy. 1,260 minutes is equal to exactly 21 hours. There's no remainder in that division problem, so I don't need to worry about any minutes afterwards. You'll see in guided practice, I kind of give you a hint when there's a remainder for now. 12 hours, 34 minutes. I don't need to convert the minutes. It's already there. So I should do 12 times 60 because I'm going to my smaller unit pieces. And 12 times 60 is 754. I'm sorry, 720 is the total there. And then I added the 34 is 754. Down here, 750 minutes. I got to divide that into hours. I already know there's going to be a remainder because of the hint the guided practice is giving me. I see I have 12 hours total that fit in. 60 fits into there 12 times, and there's 30 minutes left over. 12 hours, 30 minutes, 984 minutes. The 60 goes into there 16 times, and then I've got, after division, I have 24 as my remainder, so it's 16 hours and 24 minutes after that. That brings me next to some word problems, which really aren't that much different than the work we're doing. It's just basically asking you to go how many minutes did the walk take him. And then that one says how many hours did they do. It's just a word problem, but it's the same kind of questions we've been asking. So take a second, solve those. About usually 2 minutes, maybe 2 to 3 minutes to solve those two. It took me about 2 minutes to do the ones above. Take 2 minutes, check them with me. All right, this is your last chance to get some practice with me before you go off on doing this on your own. We can see here that we've got this one returning hours and minutes into just minutes, so I need to multiply that 3 times 60 because I'm making it into smaller unit pieces. So 3 times 60, probably do that one in your head. 3 times 6 is 18 plus a 0 because it's 10 times bigger, but I got to add on that 43 minutes afterwards plus 43 equals 223 minutes. Make sure you put your unit in your answer. It's a word problem, so say actually making a solution statement, so I would add in Chris walked for 223 minutes for my solution statement. Juliana works at her job 478 minutes before taking her lunch. How many hours did she work before going on her lunch break? Minutes to hours. It's just asking about that. Looking in there, I see hours did she work here, and minutes are here. You got to find those units in the word problems. From now on, when you see units in a word problem, just underline it to keep track if whether or not you have the same units or not, because that's your clue. If you have different kind of units, you better make them the same. So they're different. Let's change them up. 478 minutes. I got to divide 60 by 60. That would be a total of 7 times 60 goes in there, with a remainder of 58. So we've got Juliana worked for a while. She worked for 7 hours and 58 minutes before. Oh, she worked before taking a lunch break. And that's got to be against some kind of labor laws because that is way too long. But our problems don't always make sense. There you have it, friends. That's how you convert hours to minutes and minutes to hours. You'll see some of the Khan Academy review you do it. It has it working in seconds as well. It's the same strategy. Right through here in your independent practice, you'll be doing it just with minutes and hours. It's a good, quick first lesson to get you working on your own. And if you need help with it, you can comment below. I'll answer you, or one of the other teachers in 5th grade will try to answer you. And embrace that struggle. Do good work. Stay healthy. Wash your hands. See you again on Wednesday.